host while I remember. Um, let's see. Would you folks like questions throughout the presentation or at the end?
Doesn't matter to me.
We kind of set it up for them to be mostly at the end.
No problem. No
Usually what we
problem.
do.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. For this, that makes sense. So, um, please feel free to put your questions in chat. We are getting special treatment today because we got a presentation and we have two amazing speakers who have been part of this group for a while. And they are actually next door to me here in Maine. These folks are from New Hampshire, woohoo, which is in the US for any of you who are a little further afield. Um, so slowly, we're going to get all the states and provinces and territories, little by little. All of us Library of Things folks are going to connect. So New Hampshire, way to represent today. I'm so glad we met y'all, and I can't wait to hear more. I every time you guys talk, I get more good ideas that I want to steal. So I hope that you all, the rest of you on this call, are the same way and get more great ideas. They are wonderful about sharing theirs. So with that, Nick and Martha, please take it away.
Thanks, Hazel.
Thank
Can
you.
Martha be like the share the screen co-host kind of thing? Awesome.
So yes, yes, yes. Let's
Okay.
solve that problem. I'm going to make a co-host. There you are.
All right.
Nick, do you want it too?
So,
That's all right. I'm a little worried if my connection drops by chance. I will only be back in like a couple minutes. It's just we have this Comcast outage in the area and it seems stable right now, but I don't want to risk too much. So
Totally get it. We're having some interesting things too. I told you guys they're professionals. So yeah, if you're just joining us, questions, save them till the end and get ready to learn, have them drop some knowledge.
all right, I'm gonna share my screen here. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, good. Um, marketing, professionals. Okay, can you see that? Yes. Okay, great. All right. Oh, I'm on the wrong screen though. Let's not start at the end. Let's start at the beginning. Hi, I'm Martha Simmons. I'm the Technical Services Librarian at Hooksett Library in Hooksett, New Hampshire, kind of around the middle of the state. And Nick and I are part of the Technical Services Committee, which is part of the New Hampshire Library Association. And Nick, do you have anything to say about yourself?
I'm Nick Gagnon. I work at the Dover Public Library, Systems and Technology Librarian, and we're in the midst of a lot of changes at our library, in particular with some renovation projects. So, both between the building having renovations and our Library of Things going through a little mini renovation too, I feel like we'll hopefully have a lot to share that people can gain knowledge from.
So in this presentation, we're going to focus mostly on the angle of avoiding pitfalls. So how do you, whether you're kind of for people starting out with the Library of Things collection, how do you take the tips and tricks from people who have already done things and failed and sometimes succeeded? So that is, we're riffing a little bit off of a presentation that we did previously that is available on the Technical Services Committee website. So if you want more information on like the nitty gritties of cataloging, et cetera, we did do another presentation earlier last year that goes into some of those things in a little more detail. So the first thing that you want to do when you set up a Library of Things collection is to prepare, and then you have to purchase items. So I'm going to go into a little bit of that, what you can do to try to not run into trouble even before you get your collection going. So the first really important thing is try to be flexible. When you're establishing your initial setup, you have to think about how it might expand. So sometimes when you start out, things are going to have to morph as you get more and more items, different type of items in your collection. So you're going to have to organize and categorize the elements of your collection. In our library, we had about a dozen items initially. So that meant that we only needed one collection code on the back end of things. I'm the cataloger. I don't know if I said that. So that's my responsibility. And that was all we needed. But now we have over 150 items. And so we needed more categories to help organize all of our library of things and make it not so overwhelming, especially on our website, and to make things more efficient for patrons searching. So just keep that in mind that you might need to morph things as you go, but if you can set up any of that sort of conceptual work about your collection ahead of time, it might save you some trouble as you're going along and some extra work. Another thing that Nick is going to talk a little bit more in the next slide is to putting policies in place. It's really good if you can do this ahead of time, especially if you have to consult a lawyer or you're going to be circulating items that could be dangerous. And a circulation policy helps keep things consistent for staff and makes patrons aware of any fines that they might have to pay or replacement guidelines, etc. You also want to, like I said about being flexible, conceptualize your collection. So, sorry, I'm in a shared office, so if it's a little loud, I'll try to just speak up. So you want to conceptualize that collection, what it might look like in the future, and then it will help you organize as you go, either whether you're talking about your records or you're talking about the website setup. It really, really helps to do that ahead of time. And you might want to create a logo for your library of things. We didn't have one initially, and then we since have made a specific library of things little logo that we put on our items. When you label and the design of your labels, you might not have labels. It's okay. But if you're gonna want to do these things, it's good to think about it ahead of time. And you might need your design team on that sort of thing. We have luggage tags that we use, and so we put a sticker with our Library of Things logo onto the one side, and then we have the other side has information about the item and the barcode and all of that. So that's how we do it. And then you have to prepare your website, and maybe if you have Library of Things management software, you're going to have to get that all set up too. So things that are great to keep in mind before you just start flooding. You might not do that first, and that's fine too. But if you can, good to do it ahead. We didn't start out with having them a special page on our website or anything. It's totally fine to get going with acquiring items and getting them into your catalog first. I'm not saying that you have to make a fancy website or anything, but yeah, I don't want to repeat myself. So then when we get to purchasing, so some of the things when you're purchasing your library of things to consider: funding. So if you can get money from other people, it's the best. So Friends of the Library, if you can get grants, if there are community initiatives, for example, if you have a seed garden, and that you can work with a local organization, other institutions, if there are other libraries that are moving items along and you can acquire them from them, these are all great ways to fund your library of things and keep the costs down for you and your taxpayers. Another part of the purchasing is I would recommend having technical services staff, if it's possible in your institution with how things get purchased. But if tech services people can either purchase them or know that it's going to happen. That communication is very key at keeping everybody happy, having items not get misplaced or not realize that they're even there or that they are a thing that is going to be circulated. I have definitely had times when I picked up a random doodad and said, "What's this? Why is this on the cart? Is this a thing? Are we adding this?" And then you have to go track down four people to say, "Oh yeah, we bought that for Library of Things like 2 months ago." And I was like, "Oh, well, good to know." So I was like, keep the communication channels open. And if you can let tech services know, if you are not tech services buying it yourself, communicate. Related to that, order the case or the box or the packaging, if at all possible, when you're ordering the thing. This is it is such a small thing, but is one of the biggest sticking points for me that I have found during this whole process, that you get an item, it's great, you catalog it, you're all excited, you want everybody to enjoy it, and you're like, what are we going to put this in? And then you have to, track it down. You have to order the gig bag for it. You have to say, oh, what were you thinking? And then you realize that it's $50 to order and you have to get approval. So if at all possible, order the case for while you're doing it. Know what you're going to be circulating this in if you can ahead of time. It really helps. And now Nick is
I was going to say, I can totally echo so many of the points
yeah.
Martha's made here because we've run into so many of the same issues. And I always like to start out mentioning this too in a way that it may seem overwhelming when you're starting to develop your Library of Things collection, or if you're like redeveloping it, because like Martha mentioned, she started with a small, like half dozen items as well. We did as well. And we had like the outlet that would tell you how much power you were using on an item or telescope. And all those were just kind of clumped into like one collection code. And that worked when you only had a few dozen items or less. And as you get more, you'll notice you want to like subdivide certain categories or break them off into nice setups so that people can search better, more efficiently to find what they're looking for. Um, and I would also mention this is that we've had millennia to like figure out the best organizations for physical books, but Library of Things is such a new thing. It's really only in the last like 2 decades that it's really developed so fast. And I think we're even like here at Dover, we've been redesigning our system a little bit to accommodate the more items we get, the new things that are appearing, whether that's a new technological item that didn't have a category that it would fit before, and like how do we integrate it? And of course, I think one of the best things you can be doing is already, like you're doing if you're watching this, figuring out from other people around you. So I think a lot of us all share great knowledge on this. And we've definitely taken a lot of pieces we've learned from other people here. I just want to say kudos and thanks to Hazel because that really was a jumping point for us. One of the things that really got me connected with this group in the first place is our staff. We kind of sat down and thought, let's build out the Library of Things. We had a makerspace collection, as we called it, which kind of worked with items that would only just stay in-house, which we didn't really track stats well on because we didn't always ask them to check it out because they weren't going to leave the building with the item. And so we've kind of worked off of that by building a subcommittee of our staff that would look into a Library of Things. And once we were able to get people interested in the different things that they like, so if they did things in their free time, they enjoy doing crafting stuff, well, take advantage of that. Or I run the technology at the library, so I'll kind of work into that. And then we all came together and decided, like, here's some of the subcategories, here's some good item options for it. Here's some options with grants potentially or funding, or if we can tie them into other programming and those programs are funded by other groups, we could just get the items at the end of a program or something. So it seems like at first there's like a lot that you can look at, and over time it'll just like piecemeal together really well, I think. We've done so we initially in that subcommittee also looked at the logos of other people that had designed things. At the time, there really wasn't too many Library of Things specific logos, but we took kind of and embraced other logos from libraries in general, just the main logos, and just kind of made like a more funized version of it, so to speak, that would kind of showcase some of the items in a little like cartoonish looking way. And further on in the program, I'll show you some of the like one of our logo designs. We made like a children's one that kind of encompasses our children's list of items and our adults and all other items. Um, think if I had another thing I was going to share on that note, but so yeah, going with the policies. Policy is huge for us, and that was both a staple from the start in looking at how we're going to process our Library of Things collection, but also it's changed dramatically throughout because originally we would start and just instantly knocked out of the way things that were going to be dangerous or potentially hazardous or in some way like difficult to just put in place, and kept things with some simplistic Library of Things. And once they kind of built off of that, things just kind of flowed really well, and it improved both what we knew in our Library of Things agreement when we first started, which was just like, make sure you bring it back, and this is how long you get it for, to like, okay, you want to be maybe this age group or older for these particular items because they could be dangerous. We have like a wood soldering set. Obviously, you don't want anybody underage to be potentially harming themselves with that because it's a hot item. But we've also had an interest in making sure the items do come back by kind of placing like $100-ish limit on what items like require a policy signing. If it's just a small item, we're not as concerned because any books generally aren't going to be too much more than that we would have on a shelf that anybody can take out. But if it's a bigger item, say like a mobile hotspot, metal detector, a telescope, we want to try and make sure that people have some accountability and responsibility to make sure that comes back to us because our funding for our Library of Things has been a really small amount, and we didn't want to risk losing so many items going out that we couldn't replace because we knew this is becoming more popular for people to want to get from our collection. So yeah, looking into that with your like, if you can make a subcommittee group, or if you're a director or just running the Library of Things for your library, maybe consult the legal counsel that your regional area has on how to make sure the wording is best done for your agreement. I put up a little shortcut of what we have, like a snippet from ours. I've also linked it at the end of the slides so anybody can take a look at that. And our policies kind of changed in that we've added more kind of finite points to it just to make sure it kind of covers all the bases. And through the future, we originally also, in like a halfway point, decided, well, we'll just merge it with our regular circulation policy agreement for people, but then realized there was more nuance to it that we want to make sure people read through and didn't just sign and say, cool, thanks. So that's a couple of the policy points that we're going to make. Unless you have anything, Martha, we can go to the next slide.
Yeah. I actually only have one thing about that. Also, yeah, definitely adding it to the collection policy was something, the collection development policy was something that we also didn't start with, but then decided, more recently that we really should add. So we have the collection development of materials. Then also we added, the what Library of Things and programs and display spaces at the library too, to all of that as well. So I already touched on that, but we did it too. So the cataloging, I'm not going to go too into detail because of the other presentation that we had done where we delved into it a little more, but I did want to touch on some cataloging aspects that are good to do, to think about, especially ahead, so that you don't have to redo a lot of work. So when you're cataloging, I'm not going to go through all of these fields, but here are some fields that I found that are very helpful to have in Library of Things record. So, varying forms of it. So if you say, oh, bocce, I didn't know that bocce is referred to about 5 different ways. And then I Googled it and I was like, oh boy, there's like 4 different spellings that are common and 5 different ways that you can refer to this game. And so, it's fine to Google it if you aren't really familiar with the item. Recently, we had I'm not even going to remember the name of this thing now, and I already cataloged it. It is a woodworking joining hoobie. So that's not the real name of it, because I can't remember. I had to research how you even use this thing in order to be able to catalog it because I had no idea what it was for. It was 2 parts of a clamp and some drill bit thing. I don't know what this is for. So, just give yourself a little grace, look it up and find out what other people call it, because you don't have to know. Just find another expert. And then, but those things are really helpful to have in your record, because your patrons might know what they're looking for, even if you don't know what they're called. So yeah, so these are some of the fields that I have found are helpful to have in, especially for patron retrieval. And then the Board Game Geek is another one that I wanted to mention. So Board Game Geek, even though I don't have it on the slide, with the subject and genre form headings, there is University of North Texas made these genre terms for tabletop games. There's a link in the resources to that. Super helpful to add those in for board games if people are going to look for a certain type of game. And I also found that boardgamegeek.com, that is a great resource for adding subject headings and genre and form headings to your games. So a little hot tip there. And the last big tip I wanted to give you is, if you have something that you're going to make and it has a bunch of different parts, but they're all the same, you can put that on the same record, as long as your system will allow you to. So you can make a more generic record that just says these puzzles or Tonys. And then you can make item records on that bibliographic record, so that you don't have to create separate bibliographic records with lots of details all about something that is essentially the same as 20 other things that are in your catalog. Just make one Tony's record, add a bunch of item records to it that say, which one, that it's Elsa and, Lori Berkner, and you're good.
I can add to that too, in that
Yeah.
we did that same thing on that last tip she mentioned with our ukuleles. So we have like 4 different colored ones, all under the same record in Library of Things, but then each of them has their own item, just distinguishing their color. And I also want to do a big shout out, and I see Hazel mentioned it too. 246 is a huge field, and it's also super important with a variety of things that we did, because when you want to try and keep to like that really fundamental cataloging, and you take what the item is called from a manufacturer, it may not correspond to what other people call it by any means. So one of the big ones that came up for us, that was a great example, is a collapsible green background, which nobody calls a green screen. So when anybody would search for green screen on our system, we get no results, but we're like, we definitely have one. It's a cool thing. We should totally have people check it out. And we had no circulations on it for a long while because you couldn't find it in our collection on the computer. So yeah, having varying titles available in the system makes it so much better on searchability.
That's another good example, Nick, because you can also make the title whatever you want it. So if it's called a collapsible green, what was it?
Collapsible green
Panel? Or
background.
yeah, nobody's gonna even know what that is. It, like, just give it a different title. You can say title supplied by cataloger. It's fine. There's not rules. I mean, there's rules, but it's all right. Just call that a green screen. Make everybody's life easier. Don't feel like you have to be so bound to, I mean, unless you're being made to by your institution, don't feel like you have to be bound to like what Amazon calls it, because nobody calls it that. So just to talk a little bit more about cataloging, one thing I talked about in our, not to plug, I'm not trying to plug our other presentation by any means, but just why I'm not going into it ad nauseum. It is a good idea to decide if you're going to do a kind of minimal cataloging, what I call like added or value added cataloging, or like full records. If you don't have to do absolutely OCLC worthy full records for your library, I would say you don't have to, and it's okay. a completely minimal record where you just have like the basic essential, like just a title, might not be enough because people might not be able to find your item. So I recommend a more kind of added level where you don't put in unnecessary information. I have done that, and I have gone over time to a much more like backing it off. I don't put the model number in anymore. I often don't put in dimensions in the 300 field. Company names, unless it's a really important, you think that your patrons will actually search for that brand, then I don't put it, you don't have to put it in. It's okay. It's good enough. Good enough is good enough. And think about really what a patron would need. And otherwise, I would recommend don't bother because it's a little different of an animal when you're cataloging things versus books. You don't need all of that info in there for people to be able to find it and appreciate your record. So also templates are your friend. I'm going backwards apparently on my slide. Templates are your friend. If you can make a template in your system, do it. You don't have to remember all of the important fields for all the different types of library of things that you've got. Just make a template, give yourself a break. You can also copy previously made records. So you have a record that you already made. It's similar to the thing in your hand that you have to catalog. Just copy the other one and fill it in for your item. It'll save you a lot of headache. Another thing that was big that I didn't think to do for a really long time, and I'm kind of ashamed to say it, but I checked to see if there's already a record that exists out there. I didn't think of doing that for ages. And then one time I said, we get OCLC records at our library. And I said, oh, I'm gonna look up this board game. This is a really popular game. I wonder if there's the library of there. Of course there's a record for it. There's 15 records with all of the different versions for every year this game has been out already on there. I have been surprised at not even just board games, which is something that is kind of a lot of similarities to like a book in some ways when you're cataloging it, but even weird stuff. There's often a record or a record that is really similar that you could just sort of not maybe bring in, but pilfer some of the, some of the fields, some of the way they put things. Just steal it if you need to. It's steal in a very ethical way, whatever you need. But there might already be a record out there for you. So next we're going to talk about processing and procedures.
Awesome. So a lot of great points there also Martha made. And I was going to throw one other little thing out there too with that. And that the codes in when you're cataloging, definitely be prepared for changing like your collection codes or shelving codes depending on how your system works. In particular, like at first we tried to imagine what our setup was going to be and conceptualize the items, and then we blew it out of the park one year when we actually had a budget, which was awesome, and we got so many cool things, and then realized we needed to reinvent our shelving storage system. And so we had a great staff member who used to work at UNH here that had built like a little working grid key for their collection. And we kind of implemented a similar design. And in the shelving rack system, it was just A1 is the first cell bay available. And then just each level's numbered, each row is lettered. And that we also transposed into the codes on our catalogs collection. So that way, when anybody wanted to look it up, our staff can see it in the non-public side. So it's not something that the public can see because it's not available to the public to go to those bays to get the item. So it was just something that was really handy to us after we started realizing, hey, we have more than 24 items. We got to put them somewhere, and we want to make sure that they're easy to access and we can find them, especially when people put them on hold and you don't have to run around to like 16 different locations to find them. And I don't even know how Hazel does it with several almost 1,000 items. So communicating is going to be one of your biggest things, and it's going to run through every level of staffing, patrons, and everything to do with your library when you start a library things collection. Because when an item is going to be purchased, you want to make sure that everything can be accounted for from like step one all the way through the patron getting the item. Because there are going to be like manuals with the items, and the patron's going to ask a question on how to use it. And if you haven't personally used the item, you may not know. I'm not super crafty, so when a sewing machine comes my way and I don't know what items are supposed to be attached to it, it's great to know that somebody in tech services has made a little shortcut key card and attached it, so I know like, oh, it needs these two needles with it and this bobbin with it. Um, just as an example. And it pretty much goes to any of the things items that you can have out there. Another thing is like SD cards, recording things, batteries. Both of those things affect our like trail cameras, and we have like a motorized tripod and such. So those things become like important to keep track of, both for clearing and reformatting the cards, as well as replacing the batteries when people need those replaced. And I would say on this note too, just one of those little pitfall things, I like to double check reviews on items before we purchase them, because we've run into a few items where like the quality maybe didn't live up to the expectation that it's going to be used by a lot of the public. And so for instance, we have a latch on our trail camera and it constantly breaks. I've done a little jiggering to make it work with a 3-doodler pen, which is also another thing we have. And unfortunately, it didn't get as much use potential, I think, out of it as it could have, because it just easily snapped. And it wasn't anybody's fault in particular. It just is a pretty weak component spot on it. And if I had double checked reviews, I think I would have caught it maybe a little sooner and tried a different option. Then again, you never know until you get it and try it. And also another important thing is you can always do your warranties potentially for those items. So keep track of that card, which comes with it, because that can come in handy with items that don't make it as long as you expect. Yes, so yeah, batteries and all that. Keeping the containers that come in is one of the handy features we found out in the beginning, but then I also really like Martha's note. If you can combine whatever object you're buying with another piece that's going to be part of it, like right at the beginning, you'll be able to better, I think, keep those combined together. So for instance, we have a screwdriver set and we got these bags with them, and we knew ahead of time that the bags were going to need multiple slots because it comes with different drill bits and everything. So that makes it just accessible for everybody. So both the bag has the slot, it's labeled, the tool goes in the bigger pocket of the bag. It just made it really nice. And we were able to compare dimensions at the manufacturer's site with the bag and knew it was going to work instantly. And then you didn't have to go back and forth with tech services to like, oh, we need to actually send this item back and recatalog with this item instead, and yada yada. Yeah, making a content sheet, as we mentioned here, super important, I think, for us. And we've typically tried to do it for every item in some kind of way on both the item itself that can go out and get checked out, as well as either the bag or container of some sort that is accompanying the item, in case things get separated at some point, and it'll make it easier for a patron to go, oh, this had like a bunch of items in it, but I don't remember which. And then they can see right on the container, it needs to be filled with these things and then brought back to us. Content sheets are very important along with the documentation. Unless you have anything, Martha, I can go to the next slide. Yeah. This is a great example too from Martha's. I don't know if you wanted to relay some
Yeah, this
history on
was
that.
just an example that we had at our library, um, kind of going along with trying to think ahead, but being flexible also and willing to adjust over time. So we used to create, and in fact, in the last presentation we did, I I included this as an example of a way that you can keep track of what's in a board game, because it can be kind of hard, especially if you or your circ staff isn't familiar with the game and how to play. Identifying, what is that type of meeple, or what is that type of gem that's supposed to be in it. It can be a little difficult. And so we initially started to create a visual content sheet, and our staff liked it because they could see what was supposed to be in it and what they were all supposed to count and what they were called. But so it was helpful, but it wasn't necessary. And it also took a decent amount of time to create it on the back end. And it was hard also to sometimes find good images of the contents. And that added to staff time too. So after a while, I decided to check with our circulation staff and our supervisor. And I said, how helpful is this for you? Because we didn't communicate as well as we could have ahead of time with them in tech services. We imagined that this would be really helpful. And I think I did ask, hey, what do you think about this? And they were like, looks great. But we didn't ask, like, do you need this? So that would have been a good thing to do ahead of time, because later when I did say, do you need this, or would it be fine if circ staff used the content sheet in the content list in the booklet that comes with the game? And they were like, yeah, that's fine. That's no big deal. So I was like, why are we doing all of this work? So nice, but not necessary. Might be good to find out ahead of time. Saves tech services a lot of time, and circulation is perfectly capable of doing their job without it. So another note in this vein is that we also label the parts bags with the name and number of pieces that are supposed to be in it. And that does really help. So taking that time was more of a value added than making up this beautiful visual contents sheet. Just simply putting a little label that says there are supposed to be 4 pawns in this bag was much more helpful. If you're concerned about a booklet or a content sheet of your game getting lost, they might be available online. A lot of manufacturers post them on there. And you also can link to those sometimes in your records. So even a patron could look it up if they need to. And in some cases, if it's just a sheet, you could copy it ahead of time so that you have it in your backup folder in case something gets lost. So might not be as big of a deal as you think if those get lost. All right, so I will move along to our procedures.
Yeah, and I would also second that, because the last thing you mentioned, where making a copy of those manuals and the quick start guides that come with them are super handy, since they come printed on like half ply paper, and they don't survive like 2 openings from patrons. So we've made some copies of those, and I try to keep like an originals manual folder, so that way if something gets lost, we can always reference it and bring it back. That way people have it. Or like you mentioned, sometimes the manufacturer sites have it, and I got a cool example coming up that will showcase something I've been working on for that. But first, the procedures. So I ran through kind of our step-by-step, and I brought this up between pretty much everybody involved with our Library of Things committee when we started this, because we wanted to make it as simple and straightforward. So both tech services, frontline staff, and patrons are all going to like understand the system here. And it's pretty much, we have these hang tags that are going to illustrate what our Library of Thing is, if it's not an item that's open and accessible for the public to get to, or if we just need to store it in a special space for some reason or another. So the patron can see those. The hang tags are available. We have them in little buckets, which are demonstrated below. And then we feature some on like a whiteboard that's magnetic on these little hooks as well. And what they do is they bring it up to us, we scan it, and then we can go get the item from wherever it happens to be. We were typically doing like 2 bays in our storage in the basement, and we would find the item as we're labeled here on the bottom on that second image on the top rather. There's like a little code 15B0202. Well, that's going to be our 15th bay, second shelf, second one over, whatever. And then we put a little description on these. They have a copy of our barcode. The item itself is also going to have that barcode. There's 2 of them, but that way we can keep it in kind of a stream of flow. We found that if we were waiting, if like the patrons just sitting there waiting and we haven't been able to scan it because we had to go get the item, things would just kind of get lost in the flux. Makes it a little bit quicker and easier. We added our little logo on the left on these cards, and we started with a color coding scheme that divided up our subcategories on them. And then we started realizing that when we got a lot of them, we just put them in buckets by these. We still do a little yellow dot or sticker dot or some kind of color coding dot for each of those categories. And you can see we kind of have the 4 categories there. I think we just actually made 5 recently, because we had to break apart a couple things that were kind of merging too easily. So we have like technology in our red buckets, orange is board games, green is going to be our crafting supplies, and yellow is like our recreational and outdoor items. So we check that out. If it's an item that is either indicated in our system as over the $100 limit or requires a signature for 18 and older use, then we would have them sign the policy for that, which we keep in a copy like next to our circulation desk. And then we take the tag that's there. We have these blue label topped ones. I don't have one showing for a red label top, but that means the item is checked out. And we put the red checked out one in its place so people can see we have that item. It's just not available right now. But on the red tagged item, we have a QR code so they can scan it. It brings you right to the catalog section and you can just put it on hold for yourself. Nice and easy for people. And I think that kind of 4-step process was pretty straightforward. We did some practice runs, which I definitely recommend whenever you start your library of things and getting everybody on board with that because it'll flow a lot better. And then if questions do come up, people can ask them right there and you can get them all taken care of.
That's a really good point that you made, Nick, about practicing the process. So I'll just echo that. If you can practice how you're going to check in and out these items with circ staff ahead of time and have an opportunity for people to ask questions about how it's going to work. You know, what's that note for? What does that label mean? Things will go a lot more smoothly if you do that first instead of waiting for all of the questions or make potential issues to come up like after you've already rolled it out to the public, because then you get public and staff questions all at the same time, and you realize, oh, maybe I could have, you know, at least 5 of these we could have you know, rectified before we even rolled it out to the public. So that was a really good point.
Yeah,
So
presentation and promotion. And this is going to be kind of like once you get your collection going and you want to really get it out there for people to see. We had a lot of great opportunities like this where we could showcase our items. And then I had that program with Martha and we were able to kind of really showcase. And then we got really lucky and we got to showcase with our local news media station, WMUR. And we were one of the lucky libraries that got picked to showcase some of our items, which was really fun and kind of put us on the map. And yeah, everything timed out really well for that. But we really wanted to make sure that it was presentable to the public in some way and not having a specific dedicated space. Like we don't have like a library of things section, like we have a fiction section or nonfiction or a teen section or anything, but we had to come up with something that was visible and accessible at our circulation desk area. So we didn't lose people by sending them somewhere else in the library to try and looking for it. So we put these right next to our front desk. We put out a magnetic whiteboard, the clips on it for featured lists of different categories that we had. And we would rotate those usually seasonally too, just to kind of make things fit with the interest of the time. For instance, right before we just recently closed for renovation, we were hoping a bit more snow would have hit early on so we could have promoted our snowshoes a bit more. But we've been lucky now that we have some snow that they've been going out pretty consistently. But so yeah, these accessible cards, you can see the blue ones, the items available there, red ones, they're checked out, but you can place it on hold. And then, of course, with some of the items too, to make that promotion stand out a little bit more, we were able to find manufacturers that allowed you to print your logo or an imprint of it on the items. So we have a cool cornhole board with our Dover Public Library's little library mascot, Blueberry. He's a big bear that was crafted for our children's department, which is pretty cool. And it's pretty representable of our library to a lot of people in the community. We were also able to get our little tumbling timber blocks, which is kind of like an outdoor Jenga set to also feature our logo on them. So yeah, that's some of what we have.
and we're lucky enough that we have a lot of space in our library to actually display things on the floor. So we thought about using cards like Dover does, but thought that because we're able to display things, that it might end up being more complicated. So that's something that you might be able to avoid a pitfall in if you think about that ahead of time, how you're going to be displaying the items and how that will inform your circulation procedures. Because it's very individual for each library and how big your collection is, to really consider that ahead of what might be like overkill to do something and have 2 things to deal with. We actually, now that we have a larger collection, everything is kind of in different types of bins or bags, maybe not as streamlined looking as we would like all the time. So we are now considering putting some of our items that just aren't as attractive into a circulation closet at some point and making a more display worthy area that will still advertise the items in some way. Some libraries use a DVD case and make kind of like the Dover's cards on the DVD case or an audiobook case to display those in a more compact way so that patrons can still see them and interact with it and, bring it up in a more traditional way, but just retrieve the item for people because it might be falling over and looking frumpy, and you don't want people to see that. The other little picture here is we just did some renovations and we took the area that used to have our family video games, which we ended up moving, and our director had the idea of displaying our board games, and they have been going out so much better than they did before when they're on this display than when they were just kind of mixed in on a table with other Library of Things items. She said, we're going to have to buy more board games because they're going out so well. And we have this display in this picture in near our children's room. And then we have other games that are more geared toward adults over on a display in the adult room. So they've been doing great. So it does make a difference, and just try new things, see what works. So now off to you, Nick, again about more presentation ideas.
Yeah. So this is a work in progress I've been working on that I think will be a really helpful tool for a lot of our patrons and our staff combined. And it is making a web page that's kind of like a hub of our Library of Things collection and guides. And so the first two items there on the little web page snippet I cut out showcase the logos that we've built, and those will bring you directly to lists that are of those different categories for each genre. And then underneath those, I have those same broken down, but also as links to either the manuals, guides, or in some cases, we've been starting to have some staff do video recordings of them using the item to showcase how to use it. And these demonstrations are kind of just another option for people to learn like ins and outs of how to do it, especially when you look at some of the manuals and you go, it's a little confusing. But tips and tricks from our staff on how to use the item because they've known how to use the item is going to be superbly helpful, I think. And this also gives people access 24/7 essentially. So if we're not open and they have questions on how to use it because they're trying to do some craft project off hours that we're not open, they can always go back to this and reference it, and that'll give them, the tools they need when they need it.
Nick, you give me Library of Things goals.
It was cool when there was like 24 items. I was like, no big deal. But then I got to like 200 items. I'm like, oh, this looks like a really long list. So I'm trying to find better ways to make it subcategorized and not look like a really long list. But it's almost ready, I think.
We were a little fortunate. That was a nice transition. This is an image in the top right of our website, and we got the Aspen Discovery Layer maybe 2 years ago now, and that was just wonderful because it really took the guesswork out of things for me, and we ended up not having to create a Library of Things page, which in some respects there isn't as much information as I would like about Library of Things on our website because of that. We decided that we haven't decided yet to make a Library of Things informational page, but it did allow us to instantly display any Library of Things into, really pretty categories, and really easy for patrons to browse on our website. So that I feel fortunate that we were able to do it that way.
One thing I know that we went through and experiencing, and I made a big change once I got to see Martha's stuff from her presentation when we worked on it, was the quality of pictures can make a huge difference on the catalog for how people see and can use the item and what it looks like and whether or not they want to grab it. Originally, we were just like, we had some volunteers which were helpful, but we just gave them an iPad, said take some pictures of these items so we can post them, and it just looked very hodgepodgey at a little bit of a point, and it was kind of hard to distinguish some of the items, particular details. But getting like those manufacturer quality images of like the box covers or the item in use or something just made it look more appealing. And I think it fits better both in our OPAC catalog side of things as well as like presentation wise for everybody. So
And it is good to mention that you do want to follow copyright laws. Oh, I just read that. Okay. So just a note about the game covers in this image. I reached out to Board Game Geek because they have their members that will add images to their website, and a lot of them are extremely professional looking, and I think some, they've gotten permission from manufacturers to use them. So I emailed them and I said, hey, is there any way that we could use your images, and we don't mind giving attribution, blah blah blah. And they emailed back and said, hey, sure, just give us attribution and we don't mind. So we ended up putting a link in our bibliographic records that says that the board, used with permission from Board Game Geek, with the link to their website. And as a result, we have really nice professional board game images. So, don't be afraid to think outside the box and think about how you can do that. And, if you have staff that are really interested in photography, you may want to take a picture of your kit and to show what's in it, because you're not allowed to use any other images, or maybe there aren't images because you've compiled this awesome kit. Get them on board. Sorry, I think I interrupted what you were saying about promotion, Nick.
no, it's all good. So yeah, so with of course, now that you have like, if you're following through our slides, you're gonna have your items, you're gonna have a process down for how you want to circulate them and how they look out there for everybody. But you want to be able to promote them so people can use them and know about it, because it's a big thing once your library builds a new collection and you want to make sure that it gets the circulation it warrants. So we were able to tie in a lot of our items in the beginning with different programs we were offering. So this worked well with binoculars for our fun animal programs as well as local walks. We also set up like a walking path in our town, which enabled us to kind of give them a little book tour and then take items with you. And there's like a critters book in the children's room and a couple different kits that are built together that work well for that. Telescope for night sky programs. And then in these programs that we're having, we can take pictures of the event and showcase this is the object in use at a program and post it to social media. And a lot of people then see that and also recognize like, hey, we can take advantage of this too. We kind of had our summer reading program was like ending, and we got a bunch of new items at the end of summer, and so we kind of combined the two and like put out all these lawn games for people, and they were like, we didn't know the library had these things, but this is amazing. We can take it and use it at parties or events or just having a cookout or a picnic at home, and kids can play with them, or adults, because we have a bunch of different games for both genres and categories. So yeah, it was an opportunity to tie in programs with Library of Things items and really build your circulation numbers on that. And then I just threw in a bunch of helpful resources along with Martha's at the end here, because you may want to reference them. Got like our policies for Library of Things, waivers, and just some cataloging references there that Martha thought smartly to add.
We went kind of long, so sorry about that. But if anybody has any questions, then we're happy to field them.
Don't apologize for giving out good information. This is great. I mean, this is the type of thing I wish I'd had when I started. Since we have done this, um, or since I met you and we had been revising our stuff, both of you folks have given me great tips that in this community, I think we all are here to learn from each other. So,
Likewise,
yeah.
likewise.
So does anyone have any questions? You can ask, really ask anything. If they don't know, they'll just say they don't know. They're friendly folk, I can attest. Um, I have a question, which is, are leadership decided that it was okay to take the picture from the manufacturer of the item and use that image. Do you not do that, Martha, or do you do that? Yeah,
I have done that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
There were, I try not to take them from like places that I feel like put more like care into their stylizing their images,
Right. Yeah,
things
yeah.
like that. But I will say that I might have pilfered Amazon images before.
Y- y-
Um,
I feel like if it was something we
I might have done that.
purchased from
Yeah,
them, then we felt that that was a fair,
yeah,
it's that
it is. Yeah.
accurate of an item.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
but then
I
we've had
definitely.
other things where we have put it up against a white background and then click,
Yeah.
that our 3D printed cello. It's not the prettiest picture. It came from my phone. It's not the prettiest cello though either. So, you know.
Yeah, I definitely have. I threw in you know, copyright as
Yeah,
a
totally.
nod to we should think about copyright as librarians. But there are, as you mentioned, there are fair use uses. So go for it. Yeah. If
Well,
it's
they likened it to how we do that for books, right? We
yes,
take no,
yeah,
we don't show the inside of them, but we show the front cover as we
exactly.
yeah.
It's
Um
promotion for them
exactly.
as well. So yeah.
Yeah. Um, I know a lot of you are in stealth mode today. We do encourage you. We like seeing your faces. We like chatting with you. Also, if you have just a question about your library of things in general or need some advice, please don't hesitate to pop up and say, "Hey, I didn't know what you were talking about half the time, but I need this information, and that would really help me." We will not be insulted.
Sally, do you have a question?
I just always love to hear people say, what are some of your most popular items? Because I always get one or two that I haven't heard yet. So
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to hear from each of you.
I'll go first since I'm already unmuted. Mine probably aren't that exciting, I would unfortunately, but Wi-Fi hotspots are a huge one. And we got Nintendo Switches, and well, we have one Switch console, and we have, I think, three of the Switch Lite handheld units, and those are always out. They're a more expensive item, but we haven't had any major problems with them being broken or anything. More, the screen protectors get broken all the time, and things like that, but they're hugely popular.
Can I ask, when you had the Nintendo Switch, and this can be for anyone who's listening, do you send it out with some games, or you assume that they already have their games or they're going to order them through the system?
That's a really good question and a really great idea. We just circulate by themselves, and then we also have a collection of video games. Um, so we just let people pick out their games from our video game collection. But I love that idea to make a kind of kit for people. Um, it actually, it was an excellent lead into a pitfall that you could avoid. We had, when we first got the switches, this is very nitty gritty, but I thought I'd be cute and name them. So I had the Zelda Switch and the Link Switch and the Mario Switch and the Peach Switch. Um, but a patron took out the Zelda Switch and thought that it came with the newest Zelda game. And unfortunately, that was not the case. They thought that it was that edition of the, Switch, and that they were going to get it preloaded with Breath of the Wild. And we had to profusely apologize. And then I unnamed them, so they're not cute anymore. They're just like red, blue, and whatever. But so you can avoid that by I guess, thinking more like a patron, less for yourself.
I think for some of the items that we have that are really popular, it might wax or wane depending on the season. So during like the spring, we tend to find like soil tester that we have is pretty popular. In the winter, our snowshoes now have really kicked off, which is pretty exciting for us because I was really pushing for it, and I'm glad we got the snow for it this year. But yeah, metal detector, and I think one of the ones I work with the most is the digital converter system we have. So we have two different sets. We have a pair of a VCR and a digital converter, so people can do VC tapes or VHS tapes to digital formats, and that can be directly to a computer or like a SD memory card or a USB stick. And there's just one that's a digital converter that you can take, and you can plug in a variety of different things too. It just depends on the cables that you have for adapting to it. We have several available for people, but there's always one that comes up that we don't have some adapter to, whether it's like an S cable or the RCA cables and such like that. But yeah, it's nice when everything's just USB now.
Metal detectors is a really good one. We started out with one, we have three now. Really, really popular, and also keep the warranty information because we had one break, and unfortunately, I think it was just past the warranty, but yeah, keep that info. Those are really, really popular at our library. As are oh, I thought of one more thing that was really popular. Yeah, we just got an electric guitar and an acoustic guitar. And you can buy those as a little kit. So the electric one, it came with an amp and the guitar, and it has like a case. So that came all already as a kit. So things like that are out there. You don't always have to make up the whole thing yourself. Oh, and we don't have one yet, but I went to a really great presentation at NALA, the New England Library Association, this past year about Tonys and Tony boxes. Also, there are other devices like that, like Yodos, that I know are really popular at libraries. I'm really hoping we get one Tony box here because I bought one for my niece for Christmas with the idea that she would be able to borrow Tony's from the library. So I'm really hoping we get one. But yeah, kids love those, and they really work with our library's mission of literacy. And so yeah, those are great.
And one cool note that I think we got to participate in with is really reaching out to our community to find out what they wanted for the Library of Things. So whether that was physical paper, notes from people that we have like little polls, or the city of Dover got a system, I believe it's called Polco, and that allows us to set up like a monthly polls for people, and we can like ask them what would be most helpful right now for you if we had something from a Library of Things collection. Yeah, and so that also helped us find a couple things that maybe were more niche, but actually helped a lot of people in the end. So one thing was like a radon detector, which has been pretty popular around here, and as well as there's like the car, I forget what it's called. It tells you all the codes and the meanings in the car, but
Yeah,
there's
the check
codes.
engine light detector, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
the radon detector is another one that goes out all the time in our library.
Yes, diagnostic scanner. That's the name I was looking for.
Well, I want to be cognizant of time since we are over, but Nick, Martha, I'm a huge fan. Thank you both so much for sharing with us. I think this is it's so interesting because I've seen you present before, but then seeing you present now, like you have so many lessons learned, even in just a short amount of time that I've known you. So, which is wicked because I'm benefiting from those. So, thank you both so much, and great work, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much, Hazel.
Thank you to you.
Thanks,
And
everybody.
everyone
Bye.
else who's here, really appreciate you as well. Let us know what you want to have. And yeah, we are going to get speakers coming in. We've got some really interesting things coming up in different ways than Nick and Martha were interesting, which is the goal, right? We're all gonna level up together. All right, take care.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.